All of the problems I work through in my videos can be downloaded from accountingworkbook.com. If you'd like a copy for yourself, just click the PDF link and you can download a copy to your computer. Also found on the website are links to all of my accounting videos, not just the ones here on YouTube that are publicly listed. They're also members only videos. About 40% of my videos are free and open. The other 60% are for members. If you click one of the members links, it'll take you to a page that looks like this, says members only content. If you'd like access to that content, just hit the join button. Okay, let's jump into the problem. Welcome to problem 41A. This problem has us examining at long last the production report. And I want to remind you where we are. I want to give you the lay of the land before we jump into it. If a company makes products that are unique, each customer is going to be a little bit different. So think of a painter, a sculptor, an architect, an accountant. They have to track each client's costs individually. They can't sort of say, okay, well, we had 100 clients, we'll divide by 100 and we'll just do an average cost, right? Because every client will be significantly different from the last. Process costing, though, is for companies where they can say, you know what? All our customers are the same. We just serve a product to those customers. And therefore, we're not going to track by customer. We're not going to track by job as we would under job order costing. We are going to be tracking by process. We're going to say, okay, this month we did 100 units, divide by 100, that's our average cost per unit, because all the units are the same anyway, or essentially the same. So that being the case, production reports can be much more efficient than tracking one job at a time. That's what we're going to learn about in this video. We're going to learn how to prepare a production report. We're going to use the concept we introduced in the previous video, just a module 4 intro video, saying here's what an equivalent unit is. We use that quite a bit in solving these problems. And the other concept that I didn't really introduce in the last video, but I'll just mention now, is we're going to have a column, and you can see it right here. Let's see if I can get my mouse to go to the right spot, called conversion costs. And this conversion cost column, you might think, well, I can see a column called materials. I kind of know what they are. Units is like how much stuff we're making. Conversion cost, unless you're really remembering, and if you've done your readings well, you'll remember what it is. But I don't blame you if you've forgotten. Conversion is just labor plus overhead. So when we get into tracking costs, labor plus overhead is conversion cost. That's really all it is. And that's the only new concept I want to introduce here. Well, I guess if you've not done a production report, the whole thing will be new. But the big new terminology here is conversion cost. Let's jump into the problem and see how we do. Bertuzzi Tires has 3 departments. Its first department, the processing department, shows the following data for the month of July. Quick sidebar here. The way a production report tracks costs is not by job, not by individual unit, but by department. It says, okay, our production department will add this much cost to our unit. Then our mixing department will add this much cost. Then our packaging department will add this much cost. And you add the 3 cost reports together and you get a cost per unit. You figure out how much your thing costs, and knowing what your thing, whatever it is you sell, costs is a really useful thing to know. The other thing I want to draw your attention to is that we can have our product be at a different stage of production or different stage of completion with respect to materials, and then also with respect to labor and overhead. Here's an example I want you to think of. I'm making chocolate chip cookies, so I get the flour, the sugar, the eggs, the chocolate chips, whatever else goes in a cookie. I don't know. I don't cook anything. And we roll it out into dough and we put it in the oven, and it is half cooked. And at that moment, when it's in the oven and it's about halfway through the baking process, the materials I'm going to use in that job are 100% done, because they're there. Like, the materials exist. I don't have to bring any more. I'm not going to add icing after the fact. I've got all the materials I'm ever going to have in my product. And therefore, DM, direct materials, are 100% complete. Now, at that time, for sure, conversion is not 100% complete because I don't have fully baked, fully cooled cookies, right? I don't have cookies that are ready to serve. So we're going to probably, let's just say at that moment, conversion costs are 80% complete because most of the conversion costs are in the labor of making the cookie, not so much in the baking and cooling of it. But even still, you can see materials are 100% done. Conversion might only be 80% done. You got an ice sculpture. Well, as soon as you start chiseling into the ice sculpture, I imagine the materials are 100% done because you bought all the ice. You have the ice block. The conversion, though, has barely started, right? You could have conversion that was 10% complete with materials 100% complete. So that's just to say, when we look at this, and this goes to equivalent units where I said, hey, if I have a fence and I have 10 boards on the fence and I've painted 50% of them, I've half painted them, it's the equivalent of having 5 boards that are fully complete. Well, this percentage of completion comes into focus, I think. Okay, let's jump into the problem. So it says WIP beginning, units in process, 8,000. Oh, as we're filling in our table over here, I really want you to pay attention to this. The top half, maybe I'll make this yellow or something. Let's see how this does. The top half is all about units. We're not going to see a single dollar sign here. The bottom half is all about dollar signs. It's not about units at all. So the section that's blue there is all about money. The section that's yellow is all about units. So it actually makes it easier to break down these questions as you're trying to solve them and slot information in. When I give this in my midterms, I do give my students a table like this. Not all profs do. Your prof might require you to remember it or to study it or to memorize it. If that's the case, this is memorizable, so you can do this. But for my classes, I give them the table. Okay, so we have work in process beginning, units in process, 8,000. Stage of completion with respect to materials and conversion. You can see those are different numbers. Costs in beginning inventory, there's a bunch of dollar amounts. I'll put an X here, like don't you put an X here. But I'm going to put an X here because I'm saying don't look at me because I'm not going to need you until I'm in the blue part, and I'm in the yellow part right now. I'm in the top half. Units started in production, units completed and transferred out. Okay, a couple of numbers there. And then more costs. And then units in process ending. There's a question mark. I don't know what I'm going to do with that yet. And a couple more percentages. Okay, the first part of the problem, we don't care about percentages. We only want to know about units. So there's really only 3 numbers we're given. These 3, because the rest are costs and percentages. So we're scanning for unit numbers. And we also have to write a title. Let me write the title. Where did I put my keyboard? Oh, I put it all the way over here. Let's write our title. Bertuzzi Tires. Oops, I've written it in the wrong cell. Bertuzzi Tires. Production report. And we'll generally say the department, processing department. And this is for the month of July. "31 days in July," for the month ended July 31st. Okay, work in process beginning, and it says units in process 8,000. Well, look at this first line. Units to account for from beginning WIP. How many physical units were in our beginning WIP? 8,000. Units started during the month. Look at this line. Units started into production during the month. Right here. I don't know what. Maybe I'll make that into a star. 94,000. Total units to account for. Well, it's a total. It's saying what's 8 plus 94. So plus 8 plus 94, we get 102. Units accounted for. Completed and transferred out. Units completed and transferred out right here, 92,000. Ending WIP, that was this. WIP ending units, we don't know. Now, here's where, again, you wouldn't know this your first time doing the question. This line here, total units to account for, has to match, total units accounted for. These 2 lines must match. So total units to account for and total units accounted for, they're going to match. So this 102 up there has got to be 102 down here. Just has to be. So I can work backwards and figure out my ending work in process. My ending work in process is 102 minus 92. 92 plus what gives us the 102? This missing number has got to be 10, 10,000 units. And we finished the first chunk of the problem without hopefully breaking our brains too much here. Now it's to the equivalent units step of the problem. And this is where we say, okay, I have, for instance, 10,000 units here, but because they're only 50% complete, that's the equivalent of having 5,000 units when it comes to materials, or 7,000, or whatever the number is. So let's do the equivalent units, and we'll start with the ending WIP number. The equivalent units with respect to materials is going to be 90% of whatever the ending WIP was. So with materials, we had 10,000 units. They're 90% done with respect to materials, so 90%. Oops, I got to put an equals in front of that. Equals 90% times 10,000, that's 9,000. Now, when I have my students do this in class or in exams, they're writing it, right? So you're using a calculator, you're writing things down. It's going to depend on the circumstance of your class, what you're able to use in terms of tools. Conversion. We have 10,000 units that are 60% complete. So 60% times 10,000 is 6,000. What about our units completed and transferred out? Well, I wouldn't call it completed. The word completed says it all if it wasn't 100% done. I don't use any percentages here. I just say, oh, it's 100%. So basically, whatever number you write here, you write the same number over here and over here. Now, some sharp intellectuals in the class might be looking up here saying, wait a minute, what about these 80 and 35%? Those numbers are useful if we are using the FIFO method of preparing a production report, which we'll learn in problems 4.4a and 4.4b. Here we don't need them. So this is just extraneous information. And in fact, with FIFO, we would be filling in like these cells. We're not going to fill in these cells at all. So let's just paper those over. And these will never be filled in either. So there's a lot of cells that just don't get filled in on this chart, right? There's quite a bit of blank space. Okay, so let's total these. Total units accounted for 92 plus 9, 101, 92 plus 6. Don't know what happened to the font there, but that's okay. Bold it. It might be a little small, but we'll live. Oops, I screwed this up. This is total equivalent units. Forgive me. 92 plus 9. No wonder the font was off. I had fixed the font where it belongs. So sorry about that, guys. It goes in this cell. Total equivalent units. Those aren't units accounted for. Those are equivalent units, 101 and 98. These are key numbers. They're going to be useful in calculating things down below. Costs. Now we're into the blue section. Costs. So let's start with our costs. Now, these are the things I've crossed out that I said, you don't cross out, I will. We're just going to work with these numbers. And so our costs in beginning WIP for materials is 110,500. Our cost in beginning WIP for labor and overhead conversion is 33 plus 26. 33 plus 26, 59,000. I'll just do the math in the cell here so you can see what I'm doing. 33,000 plus 26,000. It is 59,000. Costs incurred 950 for materials. For labor and overhead for conversion, it's 310 plus 170, 480. Total costs. So 1,060,500 and 539,000. And in fact, we're going to just total all the way around. So total on this side as well. And let's make this a little wider. There we are. And there we have it. So these are all dollar amounts. I wonder if I put a dollar sign, what this wants to do with it. No, I can change the format here. So I put a dollar sign at the top of columns that are, driven by the dollar. Okay, I can see I'm moving myself off the screen. Let's make this a little tighter. There we are. Okay. Cost per equivalent unit. This is perhaps the most interesting and most important cell on the whole table. It tells us what our stuff costs. So we have total cost to account for here, total costs. We have total equivalent units here. We divide them. Cost per equivalent unit. Cost 1060500 divided by equivalent units. 1060500 divided by 101, we get 10.5, $10.50 per unit. 539 divided by 98, we get 5.5. Our total cost, now 1599, there's nothing to divide it by, so we just add these together. 10.5 plus 5.5, we get $16 as a cost per equivalent unit. You might not get an even number in your question. This is a nice even number. You might get a number that's like 5 decimal places deep. I would say keep at least 3 decimal places, like 3 places after the decimal if you want to be safe, because at the bottom you'll see rounding's going to hurt us. So anyway, cost of units completed and transferred out. What we do for this cell is we take our cost per equivalent unit, 10.5, and we multiply by completed and transferred out under direct materials, 92. Ending WIP, I take 10.5, I multiply by the ending WIP, which was 9,000 in that column. Same thing here, I take 5.5, I multiply by 92. Cost of units completed and transferred out. Here I take 5.5, I multiply again, whatever's in this column, 6, right? Because that's completed, that's an ending WIP. So again, 5.5 times 6. Then I add all the way around. And at this point, I'm done. Okay, so we've answered the question, but I do want to sort of explain what's going on here. A really key number is well, all the numbers in this row, but particularly the number on the right there, $16. It tells me this Bertuzzi tires, whatever they do, I guess they make tires. This processing department is adding $16 per unit, probably per tire, to the costs. So every tire that goes through the processing department adds $16 in cost to the tire. Now it's going to go through another department, and, well, they said 3 departments. So each department, let's say this department is 16, the next department is 20, and the next department is 25. The company would add all 3 together and say, well, that's what our tires cost, right? It's the costs added by each of the 3 departments. The other thing that this report serves is actually journal entries. This helps us do accounting. So this row right here, let me just find a different color, maybe green. There's a green highlighted row, will serve a journal entry. And the journal entry is to say, okay, well, I completed some units from my processing department. I transferred them into the next department in the line. So what I would do is I would credit work in process inventory processing department for the dollar amount, 147,200, and I would debit work in process inventory for whatever department it was going into, right? It becomes the WIP for the next department. So let's say it went from processing to packaging. So I debit WIP packaging department. It doesn't say that in the question. I'm just kind of making that part up. 147,200. So have I got enough zeros? Oh, I'm missing a 0 off of each of these. So again, this wasn't asked for, but I often do ask my students to give me the journal entry to transfer out to the next department. I think we've solved it though. I think we've prepared a production report for Bertuzzi tires. I know this work isn't easy, especially the first time through. When you've practiced this a few times, it does become fairly straightforward. And I can say based on experience, this is one of the more intimidating topics, but when I grade tests, students actually do very well on the production report when I test on it compared to other topics. So don't be scared, don't be intimidated. You can do this. I've seen many students do it before, and I'm sure you'll be one of them. That's all for this video, and stay tuned for the next one. We'll get a lot more practice in. Bye for now.